Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got this show where I have an opportunity to interview a lot of very interesting people on a range of different issues and then chat with you about those interviews and about my conclusions of some of the concerns that they've raised and some of the suggestions that they've got for what we need to do. And I think that Eric's conversation today about, the housing situation in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto Area and in the Lower Mainland, Vancouver, Montreal, etc., just it isn't fair to young people. It isn't fair to people that are trying to start out. That there is this intergenerational inequity that we've got going on, and I don't know if people my age, the baby boom generation or the Generation X, have really given thought to the situation that we've created for our young people today. And as I think about my kids and the potential that maybe I'll have grandchildren at some point in time, hopefully in the future, I think this is something that we've really got to give a lot of thought to. And so I wanted to go through 10 issues that I think that the generation of people that were born, prior to 1980, really got to think about in regards to the people that have been born more recently, and housing inaffordability is issue number one. I firmly believe. I think that we have gone from a situation where housing prices relative to median incomes have gone from like 3 times to 12 times. Um, um, some people have mitigated that or said we should mitigate that by the fact that interest rates have gone from double digits down to low single digits. And I think that's true. But even if you think about how long it takes to borrow, to save, to afford a down payment and or to pay off a mortgage, to afford what you're actually paying in regards to mortgage payments, property taxes, and all the other fees. Housing is completely unaffordable today for the young generation. I think that we've talked about development fees being the most regressive tax that our taxation system has, where we are making newcomers and students and young people that are first-time buyers of homes pick up the vast majority of the cost of growth when all of society should be paying for some of that growth. The fact that we've got the homes already and they need the homes, and we need them to want those homes and have those homes because we need them to be part of the employment sector. We need them to be staffing our companies, to staffing our restaurants, to employing our people, to creating the taxes that are going to pay for our healthcare, etc. Growth is something that all of us should be funding, and it's not fair. The fact that there's a couple $1 billion sitting in a reserve fund in the city of Toronto because they've collected those development fees and haven't been able to find justifiable ways to spend it, it's wrong. The fact that development fees have gone up by 1,000% in less than 10 years or something like 10 years, it's wrong. So housing affordability is issue number one, where intergenerational inequity exists. And I've been told by numerous people that we are the first generation in history that are leaving a worse future to our children than was left to us. And every other generation previously always gave a better future to the next generation. And if we're not doing that, we got to give some real thought to the ethics of that, to the financial sustainability of that, to the legality of that, which really leads me to issue number two, which is debt. Particularly in the United States with this big, beautiful bill, but also in Canada, we are growing our deficits and debts in an unsustainable manner. The debt to GDP in Canada is supposedly, 2.5%. It's over 5% in the United States, but it's going to be increasing in Canada with our commitments to defense spending and all the other things that we're spending. And you know what? The employment, while bad for youth, is not bad everywhere else, not high. And our GDP, while maybe in recession on a per capita basis, isn't in recession overall. Now should be the time where we are fiscally prudent and maybe going into surplus or at least reducing our deficit, but we're not. And, I worry about what if there is a recession? What if there is another pandemic? What if there is a war or a big crisis? Do we have the financial capacity, the fiscal capacity to address that? And I worry we don't. So I think that we've got to be thinking about, is it ethical for us to be leaving these deficits that seem to, continue forever and grow forever? And more importantly, the accumulated debt that when you add federal and provincial debt together, supposedly we're one of the most indebted entities in the world. Is that fair to the next generation? Healthcare, we make a big brag that we've pre-funded our pension funds, but we haven't pre-funded healthcare. And everyone tells me that 80% of your healthcare dollars are spent in the last couple of years, 18 months or so of your life. And we don't pre-fund healthcare. And we're going from a situation where we've had, 5 employees for every one senior to 2 employees for every one senior. We're going to have a lot less people paying the taxes to fund the healthcare needs in the future. And is that fair? Long-term care. We are getting a coming tsunami of people that are going to be needing long-term care. And there's no way that institutionally we're going to be able to afford that. And so therefore, we're going to have to be, you know, funding people, persuading people to stay at home, and we're going to have to be funding healthcare, long-term care that's going to be taking care of them. And or we're going to be building 10 times as many seniors homes as we currently have. I don't think we funded long-term care for the baby boom that are going to be in that generation. And people are living longer, and they are, as they live longer, they may not be, they're healthier during their 60s and 70s, but as they get into their 80s and 90s, they may need more. They're living longer, and they may need more assistance in those later years. And so have we taken that into account? So number one, housing and affordability. Number two, debt and deficit. Number three, healthcare expenses that are going to look like they're going to increase where we already got healthcare issues today. Number four, long-term care that is a coming tsunami that we're going to have to deal with. And yet at the same time, we've got youth unemployment that's double digit, 15, 18%, I'm told. So we've got all these problems that we're giving our young people, but yet they're unemployed and they're finding challenges getting that experience. I've got people coming to my office every day saying they can't get a job even though they've got an MBA. What do we do with this, people? What do we do with this situation? We've got to make sure that we can employ these people so they can pay the taxes, get the experience, develop the businesses, enjoy those careers so that they can be happy themselves, but also pay the taxes that are going to fund all these expenses. And we've left this situation where climate change hasn't been addressed. And we have got the biggest heat wave that I can ever remember in my experience. Fires that supposedly I've never, experienced before, and that supposedly are going to continue on a regular basis going forward. Wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, other events. Clearly, there is an issue. And at the same time, we get rid of carbon taxes that were the one way that we thought was going to be addressing climate change. So we're leaving our young people with a climate change issue that needs to be addressed. We've got wars in Eastern Europe. We've got wars in the Middle East. We've got a potentiality of something happening in Southeast Asia. We're ramping up our defense spending to 1 point something percent of GDP to at least 2%, if not to 3.5%, and 5% if you include infrastructure spending. This is going to have to be paid for by the current wage earners and the future wage earners. And I don't see us increasing taxes, even though I think we need to, with this dramatic increase in defense spending. So it's going to increase our deficits, increase our debt. It's going to compound the problem that we're passing on to the next generation. Number 8, everyone's talked about how we've got an infrastructure deficit that we're passing on to the next generation, and we can see it with airports, with rail, with LRTs that are late and over budget. That we're the most expensive place in the world to build subways and LRTs. We've got an infrastructure issue that needs to be addressed. 9, AI. It could be a huge productivity increase. It could be a huge job destroyer. And we don't know which it is yet. I listened to a fascinating podcast by Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who said that his best advice to his kids was to become a plumber because he thought all the white-collar jobs, the entry-level white-collar jobs, would disappear. Young lawyers, young accountants, young consultants, etc. So what you needed to do is to find a job that was a manual job with a great deal of expertise that you knew was never going to be able to be done by a AI or a robot. This is a risk that we're passing down to the next generation that we don't know exactly where it's going to come out. Bill Gates was interviewed and said, be curious, read a lot, and get experience with AI, but be cognizant of the risks and be concerned for what's going to happen to jobs in the future. And number 10, I think that at the same time as we got all these challenges that we're passing on to the next generation, we got to ask ourselves, have we armed them or harmed them in regards to their ability to deal with that? Because I think the combination of the lockouts during the pandemic, where people in high school went 4 years without clubs, without sports teams, without interaction with their students. People went 4 years in college or universities without the kind of experiences that were the most important experiences of my high school or my university careers. That developed the social interactions, the contacts, the connections, the social capital, the political capital that one needed long term, the networks, the mentors, the contacts that you needed. We, because of the pandemic, because of the lockdowns, have robbed them of that. And then I worry that social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., continues to rob them. Where they, our young people are spending enormous of time building very loose connections on social media, without those close, personal, one-on-one connections that I think are so vitally important to mentorship, to learning, to getting the experience that they need in society. And so I believe we have not armed them the way they need to be armed, and I believe we have potentially harmed them in their abilities to make their way in the world, to create the careers they need, to make the income that they need to enjoy life, and then also to pay taxes such that that we can enjoy the future that we need as we enter retirement. So I think that there is this intergenerational inequity, and as numerous people have pointed out in the past, when intergenerational inequity gets too big, when inequities in societies get too big to be sustainable and to be things that people support and can live with. I saw a podcast this weekend of a gentleman who said, after $100,000, more income doesn't actually add happiness. And so therefore we're, with tax cuts, adding nothing of value to people at the high end of the system, when we could be doing something dramatically important to people at the low end of the system. I think that the marginal tax rates for people that are on welfare getting and trying to get off welfare are incredibly huge. I think that, as I mentioned, that development fees, GST on housing, construction, on new housing, I think land transfer taxes are incredibly regressive, and they're paid for by the people that are young, that are students, that are newcomers to our society. I think that lots of people have mentioned that when intergenerational inequities get too big, and when inequities in society get too big, there's a risk of civil strife and stress in our societies. And whether it is the Me Too movement, or the movement, where we had about a decade ago these encampments across North America, or the Black Lives Matter movement, or the civil rights movement, or the anti-lockdown movements. When people get too upset, when they think that people aren't listening, when people think that society is not addressing their concerns, when we can see that young men have voted for right-wing populists in Canada and the United States in such large measures. People are out there crying for someone to listen and pay attention and to address our concerns. And I don't think we're listening. And I think we need to. And so housing inaffordability may be the canary in the coal mine that we've got to address. Because I think, as I've said, I think there's 10 issues, and we probably have more, but to remind and repeat: one, housing inaffordability; number two, a looming debt crisis; number three, huge increases in healthcare expenses as the baby boom ages; this coming tsunami; number four, in long-term care expenses, and the need for long-term care facilities, and dealing with people that want to stay at home and need to stay at home because there isn't an institutional solution. Five, youth unemployment that's into the double digits again for the first time in, I think, 10 years. Well, maybe other than the pandemic, but 10 years since the Great Recession. Number nine, climate change that still hasn't been addressed and needs to be addressed, that we're seemingly to pass on to the next generation. Number seven, wars that we haven't had since World War II. And we're dealing with this threat of wars as if, it's only going to be in Ukraine and the Middle East, when lots of people are saying it could easily expand beyond that. And that we're not arming our system with the kinds of modern warfare that we need to arm, and we're not even arming ourselves with the armaments we needed for the historic Cold War, let alone the drones and robots that we need today. Number eight, an infrastructure deficit, and we see it all around us. Number nine, AI, that is a huge opportunity and a huge threat. We're not sure what it is, but it could risk jobs for those young people that need to get the experience, need to get the careers, need to get the employment, need to get the income that they need, and we need them to earn to pay the taxes. And every time these pandemic social issues, lockouts that rob people, maybe justifiably to a certain extent because of the risk, but I think way too long, and maybe not, and shouldn't have been applied to young people the way that we did apply them, such that we robbed them of the social interaction, the connections, the social capital, the political capital, the mentorship that they so desperately needed to create the experience that they need to be a successful in life. So I am really worried that we've got a generational inequity that we haven't addressed and that we need to. And that my generation needs to think very seriously about, is this fair? Is this right? Frankly, is it legal to pass on all these risks to our kids and to our grandchildren? And that, every other generation, I think we're proud to pass on a better future to their kids. What happened to our generation? Where have we gone wrong? I think we need to think seriously about these issues and listen to Eric and young people that are saying it's wrong. Thanks for listening. That's Brian Crombie for the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on my website, briancrombie.com, as soon as my radio show goes to air. Thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you every night, 6 o'clock. Good night.